Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Anusha Chari, Director of the Modern Indian Studies Initiative at UNC Chapel Hill, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our webinar series titled Resilience and Wellbeing Through the Lens of a Pandemic. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Prabir Roy Chowdhury, who will moderate today's webinar on global innovation for kidney disease. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished panel of speakers. Dr. Prabir Roy Chowdhury is a professor of medicine in the Division of Nephrology and Hypertension here at the UNC School of Medicine and also co-director of UNC's Kidney Center. Thank you very much, Dr. Roy Chowdhury, for convening such an outstanding panel. I look forward to the discussion. Over to you, Prabir.
Great. Anusha, thank you so much for organizing this series and for making sure that healthcare is an important part of this initiative. As Anusha said, my name's Prabir Roy Chowdhury. I'm a nephrologist here at UNC. And I really would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of the panelists. And I would say more importantly to the audience. And I have a chat message saying unable to hear Prabir. All of you can hear me, is that correct? Just nod.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Vivek, okay. All right, let's move on. We've got people who say they can hear me. I do want to say, as Anusha emphasized, I just think we have a stellar panel here today to address the issue of global innovation for kidney diseases. The panel has, I would say, incredible expertise and experience, but I think more importantly, we have really strong representation from all of the stakeholders that are really needed for a change in the way we care for patients with kidney disease across the world. But enough from me about the panelists. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. I will say that all of you on the panel are my colleagues, but actually more importantly, are my friends. So please don't be shy about your expertise when you introduce yourselves. And I'm going to go first to Dr. Manisha Sahai. And Manisha, if you could unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from myself. And thank you, Dr. Prabir, for inviting me to this unique webinar, Innovations in Prevention of Kidney Disease and Renal Replacement Therapy. I mean, this is the first of its kind that I'm attending. So thank you for that. I'm the head of Department of Nephrology at Osmania Medical College, which is located in southern part of India. It's a government tertiary care center. In addition, I'm currently the Vice President of Indian Society of Nephrology and also the Council member of International Society of Nephrology and Chair of South Asia Regional Board. So I think I'm one of the most junior members in the panel, and it's an honor and it's really a pleasure to be with all of you here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manisha. Shubha, why don't we go to you next?
Sure. So it's a pleasure to join all of you on this webinar, wherever you are. I am Shubha Roy. I'm a professor of bioengineering and therapeutic sciences at UC San Francisco in California, United States. My background is engineering and really working on sensor technology and electronics. And over the years, I have become engaged with this very dynamic community on kidney disease and focusing on the development of renal replacement therapy and specifically an implantable artificial kidney. My roots are in the Indian subcontinent. I'm originally from Bangladesh, a family in both Bangladesh and India. And I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa, specifically Uganda. And I came to the United States as a college student almost over 30 years ago. So I feel like I have seen a little bit of the world through my upbringing, and I look forward to this presentation and engaging with everybody today.
You're a global citizen, Shubha. That's the most important thing. All right, Amit Sharma, my good friend.
Thank you, Professor. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today, and thank you for the invitation.
I live in Boston. My roots in India come from the Delhi area. Moved here as a first generation American in 1973. So I've been here quite a long bit of my life. I'm very passionate and motivated in nephrology. I did my nephrology training at University of California, San Diego. Was a fellowship chair there, and then also ran with multiple projects, led a company in dialysis, and then created a research company, and then ultimately came into industry. And so currently I work for Bayer Pharmaceuticals, which is a global company that just completed the largest CKD trial, first part of the largest CKD trial that was published in the New England Journal just a few weeks ago. We had a recent publication just yesterday in Circulation on the secondary outcomes. And so we're really looking forward to looking at how we can take some of these results and distribute them globally to improve healthcare for everybody. So a real pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
Great. Thank you so much, Amit. Dr. Sheldon, why don't we go to you next?
Hi, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Murray Sheldon. I'm really honored and thrilled to be part of this group. Although I think I may stand out just a little bit, I don't really have any personal connection to India other than some wonderful friends from India, and I keep learning more from you and appreciate all of that. In addition, I don't have much of a background in nephrology. After finishing medical school, I took training in New York as a cardiac surgeon, and I moved to California and practiced heart surgery at a tertiary community center for over 20 years. After a while, I started to develop medical devices, mostly in the cardiovascular space, although I did have a little foray into developing an interesting device for AV fistulas. So that's probably my closest connection right there. After about 10 years of that, I was recruited to join the FDA. And in 2012, I became the Associate Director for Technology and Innovation at the Centers for Devices and Radiologic Health. I don't actually review products or approve them, but my focus and the purpose of our group in innovation at FDA is to get a look at all of the barriers to patient access for innovative medical devices and to bring high quality, safe and effective medical devices to people throughout our country and hopefully around the world as well. I've had a great experience there over the last 8 to 9 years, and I hope to continue to do so. I'm very interested in the kidney space because of its tremendous lack of innovation and the opportunities that it affords us. And I'm also interested in bringing together people from around the world internationally to potentially develop a consortium that might have the opportunity to develop an implantable artificial kidney. I'll be enjoying the rest of my time with you this morning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Murray. And Murray has really been, I think, a powerful force around a lot of what we are trying to do in the United States, at least with regard to an artificial kidney. And so finally, to the man who probably doesn't need an introduction, Vivek, we've known each other for 30 years now, and just so happy that you could be on the panel. Please do go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself. You're muted. You're muted.
I did this like 10th time this morning, failing to unmute myself. So, but thank you, Prabir, for inviting me, and it's great to be with folks like Shubho, Murray, Manisha, and Amit, and Anusha, of course, on this panel. So thank you for the invitation. So my name is Vivek Jha. I'm a kidney doctor, and primarily trained as a clinician with my initial training in the state of Bihar in India, and then subsequently at Chandigarh, where I did my post-graduation in medicine and then my fellowship in nephrology, and that's where Prabir and I met for the first time. And then I continued working there in the public sector institution for more than 30 years. So if I were to pick, one of the things that I like doing, it's walking through open doors, which is what I have done all my life, and which has taken me into different directions. So after training as a pure clinician, I walked through the door to become a basic scientist and trained in US. At Beth Israel in Boston for 2 years in the same lab, incidentally, where Prabir also did his fellowship before me. And so I became a basic scientist for a while, came back to India, set up a basic science lab. But all this while, I continued to also in India do my clinical work. And as I did, you just become more and more aware of the existing socio-political challenges, which just took me through another door, which forced me to look at the public health aspect of the problem of kidney diseases, and alongside kidney diseases, many other chronic diseases that came with kidney disease, the challenges that people with these conditions faced, and the responsibilities of the entire healthcare system, not just the individual doctor sitting in front of individual patient trying to manage that individual's issues, but also to think at a health system level and look at the opportunity costs of various decisions that we make. And those decisions have ramifications, not just for the patient, but for the families and for the healthcare systems. And Murray made an excellent point, which I don't know whether everyone picked up on, is the lack of innovation in the nephrology field for more than 60 years. And that's a bit sad, because nephrology, in terms of being able to provide dialysis to patients with kidney failure, was probably one of the first remarkable innovations in medical field. One of the first, I wouldn't say the first, but it has remained there. With little change. Dialysis in 2020 looks not very different from what dialysis was generally in the 1960s. And it's people like Shuvo who are challenging those paradigms, and hopefully that will happen. But that's just one aspect of it. But then there are a number of other issues which we'll certainly talk about more and more as the day goes along. Or as the next 2 hours go along. The lack of innovation is particularly galling to me from my other vantage point, which is of having worked with the International Society of Nephrology and other professional societies, because that's a challenge in which we have really failed our communities. So it's really time that we don't have a similar similar roundtable organized in a few years and having the same conversation. So it's high time we change that situation.
Thank you, Vivek. And Vivek is very modest, as always. Vivek is the current president of the International Society of Nephrology and really has been a mover in the area of public health, I would say, in a broader spectrum in India. So thank you for all of those introductions. And before we move on to some short presentations by the panelists, followed by really a fireside chat, I want to give a challenge to all of you on the panel. And as I look at the participants, I see many people who have been very actively involved in kidney disease. And the challenge is one that we all know about. 8 million people will die in 2020, that's this year, because of a lack of access to kidney replacement therapy. The vast majority of those patients will be in the emerging economies, which together constitute 6 billion plus of the 7.5 billion people on this planet. And in addition, and this is also important, many millions more will lack basic education and awareness and diagnosis and prevention and treatment of chronic kidney disease. And this will occur across the world in every country from India to the United States. So that's one part of the picture. But we also know the other part of the picture about the world we live in, right? It's the world that Shuvo and Murray and others, so many of us live in. So that's a world of gene therapy and smart devices and kidney organoids and digital innovation for care delivery. And that's really transforming, I would say, both medicine and our world in general. And so the challenge to all of you is, how do we take that innovation and that change and apply it to the problem of kidney disease in India and in many other emerging countries globally, and also in the industrialized world? How do we take that innovation that's there in so many other fields, I would argue, and apply it to kidney disease so that we can cure kidney disease? The one last thing I want to say, and I think this is very, very important, is that India, in many ways, and that's going to be the focus of our conversation, can be a wonderful test bed for innovation. That is true outside of healthcare. It's true in the context of healthcare outside of kidney disease. India is like a continent, all of you know. And most importantly, if something works in India in terms of innovation in healthcare, then it's very, very likely that it's also going to be able to work in the Middle East, in North Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in South America, and in Southeast Asia. Really, in every part of the emerging world where populations are increasing, where access to care, particularly kidney care, is limited. So I know I've spoken more than I had intended to, but I think that is my challenge really to all of you. So with that, and I also have to organize the IT, what we're going to do is we're going to go forward for some short presentations, 3 to 5 minutes by the panelists. Some of the panelists have slides, some of them do not. And after that, we're really going to go into a fireside chat. We would welcome questions from the audience. Please put them into the chat after we finish the initial presentations. And the goal of the initial presentations is really to provide us with sort of a base that will further the conversation that we want to have, because that's really what we want to have on the panel. So with that, let me share my screen and sharing it there. And Murray, we start off with your slides.
Thank you very much, Prabir. And I'm honored to kick this conversation off. As you're in control, I'll just ask you to move to the next slide. But at this point, you know, truly kidney disease, I believe, necessitates international cooperation, as you've just described. It's a worldwide problem, and it significantly lacks innovation, but I think there are so many things that we can do together. My perspective on it, although I will be talking about the concept of potentially developing solutions for kidney failure, also extends clearly to education about kidney disease, more knowledge, testing, diagnostics, as well as preventative measures as they get developed and slowing progression. But as you say, my current focus, as I mentioned as a heart surgeon, is generally on the area that's bleeding. And I like to stop the bleeding first. And as 8 million people will die this next year, I'd like to work as quickly as possible to prevent that, and then simultaneously work on preventing the development of kidney disease in the first place. So what will it take to get the job done? Next slide. The short answer is that you really need to bring people together, a Manhattan type project. We brought people together for a Manhattan project that was in one country for a war. I'm talking about an international Manhattan project for peace. Next slide. And it's critical as we think about what to do in these areas is to listen to the patients. Everything that we do must be patient-centric. I may have ideas, we all may have ideas, but unless we listen to patients, we'll generally miss the boat. And I just wanted to show you this little survey that was recently done with nearly 1,000 people, asking patients which product would they like to see developed, and standing out largely is the next generation renal replacement therapy, such as a wearable or artificial implantable kidney. Next slide. And I'm not going to go through the problem very much, but we all know that people with kidney failure have a very poor quality of life, high mortality. The cost is enormous, and we don't have good solutions, and there's been very little innovation. Next. And if we listen to the words of Willem Kolff, who invented dialysis for the very first time in the 1940s in Nazi-occupied Holland, if we're going to keep patients alive by artificial means, which we can with dialysis, we incur the responsibility to see that it's a good life and an enjoyable life. And I believe we've not yet reached Kolff's vision. And I'd like to try to move that forward as close to reality as possible. Next. Currently, as we know, the gold standard for kidney failure is a kidney transplant, but we certainly do not have enough kidneys to go around. Perhaps in some countries, we're as high as 30 or 40% of the patients who can get kidney transplants, but in many others, it's less than that. And kidney transplants are not a full panacea. You must use immunosuppressive drugs, which lead to other issues, and rejection is still always a problem. But our current standard, as Vivek mentioned, is dialysis. And over the last 60 years, maybe longer, it doesn't look much different, even though the machines are a little bit fancier. Next slide. So what have we done so far? We've been able to put together a variety of new methodologies, some for dialysis, such as portable dialysis or home dialysis, which is generally a nice improvement, especially with COVID. But several folks have put together wearable artificial kidneys, decellularized animal kidney scaffolds, chimeras, xenotransplants. We put together vascularized kidney organoids, and even have at least an initial development of an implantable bioengineered kidney that I'm sure we'll hear more about from Dr. Roy. Next slide. But how do we really get this done? How do we move to the next step? And as a medical device developer, I'll let you know that it's unlikely to follow the pattern of most medical product development. It's going to require a lot of engineering, including human kidney cells and biologics, and the risks are great for any one company. It's unlikely to happen in that way, and it's not only going to occur in one lab. This is a global issue, and we need to bring everybody together in an area of cooperation. Next slide. And so, again, it's a Manhattan Project, and what can we learn from the Manhattan Project? It's very interesting to read the book from Lieutenant General Leslie Groves, who ran the Manhattan Project, and he concluded that many individuals from many countries over many fields over many years was necessary to bring this together. And I think we need to listen to that and follow that model. It's a great model. Next slide. But what else will it take? Obviously, money, and lots of it. But we're currently spending more than we can generally afford. And it is likely that in the future, especially in emerging economies, that the cost of maintaining people or treating people with chronic kidney disease and kidney failure will exhaust their healthcare system finances. Next slide. So this is my vision, the development of an artificial kidney by an international consortium and provided to people around the world free as a worldwide humanitarian effort for peace. These are for people who have end-stage kidney disease who cannot get a transplant. Nations and people around the world can contribute scientific and financial support, but it should be built in advanced manufacturing centers around the world and distributed to everyone who needs it. And we have models for that as well that I won't go into right now. Next slide. But we have good examples of how to do this. An international space station with 16 countries working together and multiple launch sites around the world. Next slide. And again, finishing up with the patients and patient leadership. In America, we have two large patient organizations, one of which is the American Association of Kidney Patients. And in 2019, last year, they are leading the effort to demand a change to the status quo and demand solutions that can occur. Next slide. And this year in the AAKP meeting in 2020, they endorsed an international consortium for an artificial kidney at their second annual summit. Next slide. And so I think that I'll go back to the long answer that I mentioned at first, that if you look at this African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, we need to go together and join hands around the world. Next. And we want to go far and don't want to just build a better dialysis machine. And to do so, we need to work together worldwide. Next slide. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity to introduce this subject. And I'm looking forward to hearing what others have to think about this. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Murray, for that message of all of us really needing to go together. So I'm going to stop my share and go to Amit. Amit, do you want to say a little bit about what makes you both excited and I would say passionate about trying to change the way we take care of kidney patients, or rather excited about how we could potentially change the way that we take care of kidney patients in the future? Let me stop the share for now. Go ahead.
Sure thing, Prabir. In terms of the future, the reason I was so excited about being on this call is that, as we've learned through this pandemic, the world, as Tom Friedman says, is very flat. And innovation comes from these opportunities of locations and others that you wouldn't expect it. I can just give you a few examples. As you know, one of our challenges for diabetic kidney disease and CKD in general is that we need to, maybe figure out a new way of doing things. What we're so excited about is now we can detect, we can analyze, and we can treat. And I'll just give you a couple of personal examples, and I know all of you are doing the same things. I live in Boston where there's so many physicians and so many hospitals, but now, even for my physical or my physical therapy appointment or for even, lab tests, I can do all those at home. And what that strikes me now is you don't need to go to these institutions. You just need to be able to get data, interpret that data, and then make an intervention. And so we're doing a couple of projects with some of the top centers in the world that include, the MIT group here, the Broad Institute group, Stanford Innovation Digital Center, and others, where we're really trying to take it where the patient is the center of therapy. And what I mean by that, no one cares more about their health than themselves. And we want to take this opportunity to go to the next round. And as I mentioned, we're just completed a trial, which we were in 49 countries. We did screened over 41,000 patients and we enrolled over 13,000 patients. This trial took 6 years and at a cost now just somewhere between 1.5 and 1.7 billion euros. We think in the future, we can do similar work a little bit faster, a little bit more timely, and we can get information on a real time. So one of the things that we're doing and really want to maybe see if it can work is that if you do take something like, this Apple Watch that we have, you have a sensor and then you can predict, whether it's an EKG or whether it's a rhythm or whether it may even be some type of exercise quotient, then all those type of real-time interventions then can be uploaded and come back to the patient. Because as you know, and as we've talked about, the number of phone lines versus handhelds or just mobile phones has been exponential. And I know working with the ISN, I know Vivek has worked with my mentor, Ravi Mehta, in the ISN project 0 by 25, it strikes me that almost everyone in the world now is connected to some network. And that network then allows for innovation. So I'll just stop there and look forward to the fireside chat. But we're facing not only this pandemic, but we also have this metabolic issue with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, leading to chronic kidney disease. And it's our belief that we can go way upstream and make a big difference. But it takes people like you and innovative thoughts from this type of group to make a difference.
Great, thanks very much, Amit. Let me go back to sharing the screen. And I am going to go now to Dr. Shubho Roy. Let me put this on to, okay, there you go, Shubho.
So thank you, everybody. Very interesting words, and I hope I can contribute to this discussion as an engineer, very much engaged with this community. So there's clearly a lot of innovation going on in the scientific and technology communities, and how that moves towards the kidney community, I think, is paramount to what we want to do. So I'll talk about a very particular technology, which I'm calling MEMS. So MEMS is a mouthful. It stands for the word micro electromechanical systems. And I think it can really be a leading technology suite that can impact kidney disease. So let me just quickly tell you what this means. It's basically making electromechanical components, not just electronics, that are very tiny. And you can see some pictures on the right. You can make motors, you can make little mechanisms, as well as electronics with high precision. They're highly reproducible, meaning that you can make them using mass manufacturing techniques. And once you achieve the economy of scale, they tend to be very cheap. So let's go to the next slide. And it really takes advantage of the investment and the breakthroughs we've had in silicon semiconductor manufacturing. We are now talking via Zoom. We are talking via the opportunity of using phones, computers. That's all based on silicon semiconductor electronics. What has happened over the last few years has been using this technology to build devices. And here is an example that Prabir is showing on the screen of an airbag deployment sensor. Okay, so let's go back a few decades. Airbag deployment sensors, the physics was well known. They cost about $1,000 or more to build and put in very high-end cars. But by bringing this MEMS technology and mass manufacturing, we're able to make a sensor the size of a thumbnail. And now this is on the production cost on the order of cents. So think about that. We've taken this very sophisticated electromechanical sensor from thousands of dollars in the US down to cents. And now go to the next slide. Now we've expanded this technology and there's multiple sensors in cars. So it's not just one. You've got over 40 electromechanical MEMS components in cars. And this is being made possible by the silicon evolution. And if we can take that paradigm and how silicon MEMS devices have affected many areas of life, transportation here being one, industrial control, airplanes being other, but providing sensing and control, we might think there may be an opportunity to do so as well as in medicine. Let's take a look at the next slide, because I think this captures one of the terminologies that Prabir put up, which is the idea of, are we at the cusp of a cell phone moment? So look at these portable phones over the decades. And today we have a smartphone, like my own phone on my hand here, and we're able to get all these functions, hundreds of functions, down to one single device that we've become highly reliant on, and it's crossed all strata of society, all over the world. So this is the power of what the semiconductor revolution has done to the information community, has done for the transportation community, and is beginning to touch medicine in other areas. Go to the next slide. And I think there's really an opportunity to think of using MEMS and its sensing, actuation, electronics technologies to hit the next frontier, which is in kidney disease. Let me share a couple of examples that are already in the medical community. So here are examples of point of care testing. And what we've done using the same technology is take point of care testing from highly centralized labs and democratize them to make them available in the home, in the doctor's office, on the road. And what makes this possible is the technology that makes it portable, but cost effective and still accurate. And we can communicate with this via Bluetooth, wireless, and through the cloud. This is the power of what MEMS can bring to the medical community and hopefully to the kidney community. Let's go to another example where we can see where MEMS is in action closer to the kidney. Next slide. And this is actually monitoring hemodialysis. So you have the dialysis machines, here's a sensor that will actually monitor the urea concentration in real time. And this sensor is again made using the same basic technology that I've been talking about. And what is attractive about this is it allows us to monitor these conditions just using low-cost devices that can be used on different machines, and doesn't have to be done in the country like the United States. It could be done in India, it could be done in Bangladesh, it could be done in sub-Saharan Africa, because we are making the technology not only smarter, but cheaper as well. Let's go to the next slide. And you can take this whole idea and think about making drug delivery systems. It doesn't have to be just sensing. So here is actually a little pump system that was developed in Europe years ago, but think about this. This particular picture that I show was designed to be used for diabetic insulin delivery, but you might be able to use it as well for other drugs that are relevant to the kidney community as well. But again, you've got a system that's small, that's cheap, that's highly reproducible by mass manufacturing, that allows it to be used across different environments and hopefully in a cost-effective way. Let's go on. And then I'll end with one slide where we're taking this idea of silicon microfabrication technology to build a bio-artificial kidney. Dr. Sheldon talked about building an implantable device that provides renal replacement therapy. Here's what we're working on, which is using semiconductor silicon to make a highly efficient filtration unit, couple that with cells that can provide some of the other metabolic functions of a kidney, all in a package that can fit inside your body, surgically connected, and provide continuous renal replacement therapy. By itself, this may sound very far-reaching, but the technology fundamentals that are needed are around, and a lot of the non-organic part of it is based on semiconductor silicon. But we're also taking advantages of all the other breakthroughs in stem cells, in gene therapy, to make sure we have a biohybrid device that can get us to the next generation of renal replacement therapy. I welcome you to look at the website where the videos and you can get more information. Next slide. What I hope I have done in the last few minutes is to give you a sense of this technology MEMS and how it might help kidney disease. It's already been used in the cardiovascular realm. People are exploring in neurological realm for brain probes. We are now hoping that it could also revolutionize kidney disease by providing sensors and systems that are smaller, that are smarter, that are cost effective, and allow kidney disease not only to be treated, but diagnosed and hopefully prevented in the first place. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. That was amazing and exciting, and we're going to come back to that. So I'm now going to call upon, let me just run through, I'm going to, give me a moment. I'm going to call upon Manisha, and I'm just going to run through Murray's slides to get to Manisha's slides. There we are. Manisha, you're on.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Prabir. And that was an exciting presentation from Shubho. Mine is not that great. That's the holy grail of dialysis, what he is showing. So I'll be talking about the more practical aspects of my country, India, which is a developing country, and we have very few nephrologists and 1.2 billion people to cater for. And as Dr. Prabir said, if it works in India, it will work anywhere. Next. So I'll be talking about some thoughts which can be done right away in our country and many other similar countries in the world. So we employ what's called the hub and spoke model of dialysis, or dialysis at doorstep. So in India, we have a shortage of nephrology workforce. We are 2,000 nephrologists for a population of 1.2 billion Indians. Most of the dialysis centers are located in the cities. So in our state, a unique model was adopted, which we call the hub and the spoke model. The hub center lies in the main city, and the spoke centers are in small districts around that hub center. Hub center has nephrologists, maybe one or two. It's attached to a teaching hospital and has multiple machines, whereas the smaller spoke centers each has around 10 machines. It's headed by a non-nephrologist whom we train at the hub for 2 weeks. The hub centers monitor the spoke centers. Monthly physical visits are there. Otherwise, we communicate by telemedicine. All data from the spoke is uploaded and the hub center monitors the data. The facility is reimbursed. It's completely free for the patient. And that happens only when all the data is uploaded by the spoke center and verified by the hub center. So this has brought dialysis facility within 10 kilometers for all patients. Previously, patients were traveling 200 kilometers to the city for dialysis. So now we call this the hub and spoke model with dialysis at doorstep, which has solved the problems twofold. First thing, the hub center nephrologist monitors all the spoke centers which are headed by non-nephrologists. So they are also engaged in the care of patients and they are monitored, and the patients, they have easy access to dialysis. So later on, we plan to add on some other facilities like mobile diagnostic labs, because many of the spoke centers do not have local diagnostics available. There's ambulance facility between hub and spoke centers, and slowly all of them, we are trying to get them accredited. So this is what the hub and spoke model is. Next, please. So this is the data, and this is our paper on that, the hemodialysis at doorstep model. Next, please. Next, yeah. So now the further step would be, some of the areas are far-flung even from these spoke centers, and we want to have a provision of dialysis on wheels for any such emergencies where the dialysis van is fully equipped with the staff, with the equipment. So this is the hub and spoke model, which is running successfully since last 2 years. And I believe such model can be implemented in different states of the country where we have a poor nephro workforce and a lot of patients to care for. Next. So the second topic, which can happen right away in India, is harnessing the power of cell phone. So whether electricity is there or whether water is there, one thing which is universally present in even far-flung areas of India is mobile network. Most of the population is covered by mobile network, and this works everywhere. Next. So how can we harness this? Next, please. Yeah. So we can use this mobile network, the cell phone app for the patients. Go back to the previous slide, please. Previous slide. Yeah. So cell phone apps for patients, where they can take a picture of the food they are having and have a direct count of the calorie and protein. Just a picture of the food, which translates into the numbers. Then the cell phones can serve as pill reminders for looking at the quality of sleep, for having different types of kidney diets. So patient utility. They can also be used for patient education. They can be used as tools for answering patient queries 24/7. So this is the patient aspect, how they can use the cell phone. Next. And as Dr. Prabir said, the patient is the best monitor for himself. So we can do dialysis audit. We have, as of now, quality control audits, and we have inspections and all, but this can be simplified. The quality control can be handed over to some extent to the patients themselves. So like we have a feedback on cell phone or car ride, which we had an Ola ride or an Uber ride, we can have feedback on dialysis audited by the patient. So we can rate the dialysis. So that's the second important use of cell phone. Then we have less nephro workforce, but we have a huge dialysis patient workforce. We can empower them, we can utilize them by asking them to upload their data themselves. So we can have cell phone based registries. These may not be accurate, may not capture all the data, but Here we do not have a proper dialysis registry, and we can utilize the patients, many of whom are educated, to upload their data through the cell phone. Next. Also, the cell phone can be used for creating modules. As I said, many of the doctors handling dialysis are untrained, so they can use the cell phone-based modules for training dialysis doctor modules. We can have nursing staff modules, dialysis technician modules, and patient education modules. So cell phone can be used in so many different ways. The next important point, what I feel in India, we should concentrate on green dialysis or the waste utilization. Hemodialysis generates around 300 kilogram waste per person per year. This calculation we've done, and this data also is by FDA. And 1/3 of this is plastic waste. Similarly, peritoneal dialysis, you'll be surprised, generates around 800 kilogram per person per year waste. 1/3 is again plastic waste. And we can employ, and this plastic can be shredded down in special industries and can be recycled. And many centers are doing that in different parts of the world, but doesn't happen in our country. The other thing is the waste water. So in India, very few centers have this green dialysis facility where we use the reject water from dialysis. So we all know that each patient's dialysis for 1 year, we utilize 355 into 10 into 12 liters of water. So a huge amount of water is used for each patient per year. The RO reject water, which is around 60%, is as good as potable water, but we are throwing away all this water in a resource-limited, resource-constrained country. Similarly, the reuse of dialysis water, if not for drinking purpose, it can be used. The spent dialysis also can be used in bathrooms, gardens. This we are not doing. And we can lastly harness the solar energy for dialysis, as our unit is trying to do now. So we are writing some project on that. So this is about green dialysis or reducing the carbon footprint. Next. The fifth important thing is, in India, we have a lot of brilliant minds, the technicians, the engineers, we have reputed institutes, and we have a lot of medical doctors. But unfortunately, collaboration between them is poor. So I feel collaboration between IT industry, the IIT, and the medical doctors would yield very good results. So this can help in real-time sensing of blood using smart sensors, or filter effluent and adjustment of prescription, as was mentioned by the previous speaker. And we can have biocompatible Make in India membranes for dialysis. So this sort of project also is going on in some parts of our country. Next. Then optimal utilization of deceased donor. So we are using many organs of deceased donor, but we can think about using the blood vessels from deceased donor, which can be preserved and used for development of AV access. When we are utilizing the kidneys, livers, intestines, what about the blood vessels? Similarly, we are throwing away, in our state at least, all the pancreas, bone, and intestines, and we don't have any banks for that. So our state can focus, or some parts of India can focus on utilizing the deceased donor as a whole. Next. Again, as I said, most of the meetings where we discuss about innovations, they include the doctors, the medical doctors, but I think patient also is an important stakeholder. They have brilliant ideas. The end user finally is the patient. They should be included. The policy makers should be included, otherwise nothing happens, apart from the doctors, nurses, and the engineers. Next. And then I believe in cross-connect and interconnect for CKD prevention. What's happening is most of the nephro societies are disseminating a lot of knowledge, very useful knowledge, by different apps to the nephrology community. Unfortunately, many of the patients in countries like India are handled by general practitioners and physicians. So I think we can have cell phone-based or virtual-based course modules for the non-nephrologist, focusing on what to do, what not to do, myths and facts, because majority of CKD patients in the early stage, where we can reverse the kidney disease, are handled by physicians who are not being educated by us. The other concept I believe is in cross-connect, where we can spread the knowledge of nephrology to other specialties. We have a lot of obstetric AKI in India, and we can have combined meetings and interactions with nephro-gynec as well. Next. This has been discussed. The point of care technology by the previous speaker, I won't touch or go into that. And lastly, Yeah, okay. So this was the last slide, and there was another slide which I have sent separately to Dr. Pradeep, if he can run that. What is India? So I don't know whether he'll be able to open that. It's just a 30-second presentation there. I've just now mailed to him. So if he could open that.
Manisha, could we leave that till the end or sometime during
Sure,
the...
sure. Should be fine. Should be fine. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop my share and okay. So that was actually that was huge. So Vivek, you're the last person, but and I kept you last in to some extent to get your wisdom. I am looking at the time as well, and so I would like you to talk very, very briefly about the things that you're passionate about, but I'm also going to ask you to flow into perhaps the first question that I have, which is how do we put all of these things together, right? It looks as if we've got the cell phone and the MEMS and the manpower. How do we put it? Why haven't we put it all together? So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about that as well. You're on, Vivek. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prabir. And really, you're right that there is not much that is left to be said in the innovation space. I think Murray and Shubho and Amit and Manisha have covered it all. So let me try to do the difficult job of putting it all together, as you said, Prabir. So there are lots of things that that were mentioned, and if one could just summarize them into a few words, I think it's clear that we have a very large undiagnosed and untreated population of people with kidney disease around the world, more so in less developed countries than in the more developed countries. We have shortage of workforce. We did speak a lot about dialysis and providing care to patients with end-stage kidney failure, which tells me that there is clearly a disproportionate focus on dialysis technology. This is not to say that there is not a great need, of course. I mean, there is a large number of people who are dying without getting dialysis today. So of course we do need that. But then there is a 10-fold or 100-fold larger number of people with early stage kidney disease. One thing which we didn't focus so much is the lack of guideline-based care and quality metrics, especially in large parts of the developing world. Go to sub-Saharan Africa, go to large parts of South Asia, Southeast Asia. And we did have a number of items put forward, which included various kinds of artificial kidney treatments and cell phone technology and so on and so forth, which if I play the devil's advocate, it might seem to sound like that there is a technological solution available and it will fix all the problems. But let me say that technology is just part of the solution. I think the big problem is for us as a community going to be to put it all together in a way that can support the variety of healthcare systems that exist around the world. So the solution is innovation in how we manage our healthcare systems, so that how it all comes together. How do we optimally utilize the resources that might be available in different parts of the world? How do we make sure that while we bring in these wonderful advances, they can be delivered to people who need them the most in a sustainable manner? So it's a question of both organization, but also funding. And I remember a talk that Prabir asked me to give some years ago in the American Society of Nephrology meeting. It's a question of financing and it's a question of politics as well. So we need actually innovation in those spaces too, so that we are able to come up with solutions that can do the most good for most people. So this, putting this all together, what we need is a skilled politician, really. That's what we need, indeed. And when I say politician, I don't mean a career politician. What I mean is us as a community becoming aware that delivering care to our people with kidney disease in our case, but kidney disease is of course linked with a number of other health conditions. And I like the quote that I heard from somewhere, I forget where now, is like kidney disease is perhaps the canary in the coal mine. which can tell us a lot about what is going to happen to this individual in future. It tells us a lot about cost and access. And if we use the term that economists use, that we are in a demand supply situation. So while we improve the availability of supply of appropriate solutions, we also are equally compelled to reduce demand of need of the people who will need all the various solutions that are being developed by innovators like Dr. Roy and Dr. Sheldon and many other people. We also need to broaden our horizons as physicians, the kidney care community. And so we need some innovation in education also. And we need perhaps to just open our minds to the fact that not everyone who develops kidney failure can be necessarily treated in the best possible way by offering active kidney replacement therapy by dialysis or transplantation. That things like conservative care are equally good, and we should offer them to people who need them the most. So from our focus on technology, which the last thing I would say, and this is to again frame the conversation also, is that as we get very excited about these new developments, whether it is in the space of drugs or devices or some other technology that comes along, whether it is cell phone or something, all of these have paradoxically the likelihood of increasing inequities in healthcare delivery. So we need to always remain vigilant that there is a huge existing inequity, and it will likely worsen unless we take active steps to address that inequity. Whether it is in the care of people with advanced kidney failure who require dialysis or organ transplantation, or it is in the care of people with early stage kidney disease, which is often associated with multimorbid conditions, who require simple guideline-based care. We do know how to treat these individuals, but we just don't know how to get those effective treatments to the individuals who need them the most. So we need to innovate our implementation, and we need to carry out implementation research, generate appropriate evidence that helps all of this, and then take them to the policymakers. So I'm going to stop here. I'm not sure that I tried to put it together. I think there are a lot of hidden questions here, which I hope we'll be able to discuss in the next several minutes.
No, thank you. That was actually a really good summary. So let me put out sort of build upon that, Vivek, a little bit. So you mentioned about the need for policy and politics and government. What about what are the changes though that are happening in India currently? So we hear about Ayushman Bharat, we hear about other insurance schemes. Is that going in the right direction? Can the kidney community piggyback on that? Or do you think the pathway is to develop a network of NGOs interacting with the government to really achieve some of the things that you said? Because the implementation, doing what you've said, that's the difficult part.
Yes, indeed. The first thing that I would like to say that it's not in India, but throughout the developing world that green shoots are now happening. So that's whether it is in multiple countries of sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia, Southeast Asia, etc. And the other thing to say is that all progress is good. Can we do better? Of course, we can do better. And there are examples right around us. For example, Bangladesh is making good progress in many ways, doing better than India, which is fantastic, and we need to learn from that. It's not a matter of competition; it's a matter of learning from each other. Is what I would like to say. Now, how can we do it? I think we have to recognize that for these conditions, at least in those parts of the world where there are very large number of, as I said, undiagnosed and untreated population, we can't get away from recognizing the primary role of the public sector healthcare. It is only the public sector healthcare that can bring it all together, at least for a large proportion of the population that we have in these countries. NGOs and private sector also have their roles, and so that is what takes me to the term health systems, because health systems include all of these. So this is not to knock the private sector, but we need to recognize the value of public sector healthcare system, which is primarily run by the government. And this is, I think we take ourselves back to the days of Richard Nixon when he signed the bill that allowed dialysis to become available to people in US. And if you look at it, the dialysis treatment from a global perspective, dialysis is still perhaps a diagnosis by discrimination, in which almost in all countries of the world, it is considered acceptable for the public sector healthcare to fund dialysis without asking any question, right? So that's something which has been unique to the kidney community. And to my mind, I think it stifled innovation to some extent, because funding was so easily available for dialysis, whatever way it was given to everyone who needed throughout the Western world. And to the extent that ethical guidelines in many kidney societies say that lack of resources is not a good enough reason to deny treatment to people, which is absolutely fine, and that's the way it should be. But then I think that prevented the growth of innovation in the dialysis space, and it's only in the last about 10 to 20 years that there has been rapid thinking and developments in that space. You, Prabir, have been in the middle of this through all the initiatives that have been undertaken in US in the last 5 years or so, through the American Society of Nephrology and the Kidney Health Initiative, etc., which basically tells us that as a community, we need to come together and advocate for our patients, for the society. And involvement of communities is essential, and it was mentioned earlier as well, both in research and in advocacy, because once communities get involved, they are the group of people who will go to the politicians, put political pressure, and get funding for research, which is critical as well.
Great. Thank you. So I have some questions from the audience, but before we go there, Manisha, I'm going to try and get Manisha and Shuvo in a way together, if you will, even though they're separated by 10,000 miles. So Manisha, you spoke about a lot of really interesting things, hub and spoke, using people who are maybe not medically qualified. I would go a step further, maybe people with a high school education or less in kidney care. And my question to both you, Manisha, and Shuvo is there a future for the MEMS point of care testing linked to cell phones to really change education, awareness, diagnosis, prevention of chronic kidney disease in India? I would love for either of you to make additional comments.
So you would like to go first, Shuvo, or shall I?
We'll let you go first, Manisha.
Okay, fine. So I firmly believe yes. So I'm not as old as some of you, not very young either, but I firmly believe that cell phones in India are a great tool, a great asset. And any part of India, you have the cell phones. And many of the younger generation, even if they belong to not so well-to-do families, all of them, most of them have smartphones, and we can use this technology. So I think, they definitely have a role to play, and we can utilize them in many ways. As I said, even for auditing the quality of dialysis, they would be useful for spreading patient education. They are going to be useful for sensing the body composition. You have some technology where Shuvo can tell, where you can sense the body composition. The cell phones can pick that up and then again adjust the prescription. So I think, sky is the limit. So I guess cell phone technology, a small tool and many users. So yes, for countries like India, definitely yes.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. But what do we need to really achieve it? So, and I'm going to take a little bit of a step back for perhaps the next 40 minutes of the discussion. we have this continuum, if you will, of education and awareness, diagnosis and prevention, and ultimately therapy, right, for kidney disease. But then around this continuum, we have things like innovation and care delivery and political will and funding and stakeholders. And I want you to comment, or others on the panel, I mean, what do we, is it funding that's the most important? And I know Vivek addressed a little bit of it. Is it the funding? Is it the political will? Is it the stakeholders? What do we need to really do what you're suggesting? What will it take to take what you've begun to do and expand it across the country, really across the world? Anyone on the
Sure, let me start. So first of all, I agree with everything that Manisha said. And it's obviously money is part of the equation, but it is not the only part of the equation. The significant component that's about education and awareness that doesn't necessarily require the tons of money for the types of high-end technology development, but you have to get lots of people together and aware. So a few years ago, I was invited to come and visit with the Tankar Foundation in Tamil Nadu by Dr. Georgie Abraham. I got a chance to visit all the great works they do. And what struck me...
I'm going to say Georgie is a participant, so choose your words wisely.
I don't have to, because it was a wonderful visit and a wonderful experience. And while I have focused a lot on developing high-end technology for an implantable artificial kidney, it opened my eyes to the range of what's possible by even bringing the technologies that are what I would call low-hanging fruit to the masses. And working with foundations like the Tankar Foundation and other various foundations in India and across the world, you can raise awareness to bring technologies that have been developed already for other medical conditions, monitoring. So a great example is diabetic monitoring using the Dexcom system. It's a wearable patch. You can leave it on for 10 days and you monitor your blood glucose. It is becoming more and more widely available in the United States, but moving worldwide. Think about that. If we have a wearable patch that can monitor urea or creatinine, others that can monitor pressure, these over time have become low cost and can be made widely available, and bringing physicians in the nephrology community with awareness raising campaigns such as Tankar does, and then engaging in India, for example, with very strong engineering communities in the various institutes to collaborate and make that possible, I think is a great way to do it. We just have not traditionally brought engineering and nephrology together, but fundamentally, a lot of these are engineering solutions that do not require what I call discovery science. It's just implementation. And by bringing the local people together, I think you can make a big impact.
Okay, great. So let's, yes, Vivek, a quick response, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience.
At the risk of redundancy, but I think the point that Shuvo made, the very last one, is critical in my opinion, is that what we need to do is to take existing knowledge to the people who need them in a sustainable way. We don't necessarily, we need innovation, but we don't necessarily need innovation of the sort that is happening, the high-end innovation to solve a large set of problems that also exist in our healthcare systems. Whether it is, again, this is not unique to India, but to many parts of the world. There was mention of cell phone, etc. But we have to recognize that these are not technological fixes. These are technologies that should be used appropriately in the health system's context. So how do you adapt the technology to the available resources and available values and preferences of the society and the people who use them? And Amit is here, and we can bring in medication reforms also here, right? So there are, especially for people with kidney diseases, we know that a person with kidney disease will require 4 or 5 or 6 or even more different types of pills. How do we combine them? India is a house of, is the capital of generic drug industry. So how do you innovate even within the existing generic drug industry? No one is thinking about that because, so how do you reduce the likelihood of complications by combining low dose multiple agents in a single pill, which improves adherence, which reduces the risk of complication, and which of course improves the long-term outcomes, because otherwise people will often skimp or one or the other, or it is up to physicians who often forget to add one evidence-based treatment just because they're adding four more. So I think there are a number of things which we can do if we just put our minds to it, and it doesn't require a very high-end technological solution, but something which the matter of process innovation.
Is very well made point. Amit, what do you think about this? I mean, can big pharma develop the right sorts of partnerships to make this happen, or is big pharma the obstacle and the barrier in the way of being able to have what Vivek said happen?
I think it's an excellent question. I think, if you read Eric Topol's book, The Patient Will See You Now, I think he has a concept that says bottom up medicine. And so what Vivek says really resonates with me. I know a lot of us have been on different type of calls that, or thought sessions or think tanks where we've talked about the poly pill. We've talked about, in a world, if you had an aspirin or a statin, an ACE inhibitor all together, then the likelihood of what Vivek says of not only adherence, but also the real benefit and value is clear. I think what's the struggle for, either biotech or big pharmaceuticals, a lot of these technologies have already been around in terms of generics and in other places. And so I think that's where the tension rises in terms of the pharmaceuticals, where they, like for us, we did a little over 1 million different analogs to come up with our, novel medication. That from start to finish, that took us 17 years to develop. And the cost of doing that per year is, as I mentioned, the trial cost, 1.5 billion euros, but the 10 to 15 years before that cost a considerable amount of more resources. And so it's just getting that investment and then moving it forward as a corporation. Open for more questions, but I think that it would have to be a public-private partnership, as Vivek said, from a government piece, and then seeing the value in the future. I don't think industry on its own would be able to take on such challenge.
I agree. I didn't mean to indicate that it is up to the industry to do this. I think it's the job of the community to come together and do this. Industry can be a facilitator, and this approach is not in competition with drug development, the traditional way that it takes place. Big companies do, and we need them. Of course, we do. There is no question about it. But I think Bayer makes aspirin, right? I mean, and aspirin has been around. Do we know how to best use aspirin in patients with end-stage kidney failure? No, we don't. And we need that answer, right? I mean, and that answer can come only with the kind of partnership that can happen between academics and pharmaceutical industry. And with support from the government, because this research, to expect Bayer to fund this research is unrealistic, and and so it is appropriate for the public funding agencies to fund this type of research, to be able to, for us to make a decision. Otherwise, what is happening right now is random treatment. Any physician or any nephrologist decides whatever they want to go ahead and treat their patients. What we need really is randomized treatment, in which patients are randomized appropriately to different treatment modalities, and we know the answer to what works and what does not. So I would stop there, just on the topic of drugs, since we were on it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm going to go back to something that you said, Vivek, about implementing the therapies that we have in a more effective way. But I am going to go to Murray and ask him to comment a little bit on perhaps the counter argument, and this goes back to the cell phone analogy. Can we use innovative technology to make this quantum leap that, in a way, cell phones allowed us to do for communication, which will also result, or which can also result in a decrement in cost. Now, I know that's really difficult because the history of medicine is full of examples. Better care, to some extent, a new care often costs more. But is it possible to use the silicon membranes and the MEM systems, or the things that Murray, you were talking about, to, at the end of the day, reduce cost? And again, the cell phone analogy in India is that in 1991, there were 50 million landlines. There's still about 50 million landlines in India, but there are 1.1 billion mobile phones in India. So Murray, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, certainly costs are going to remain a major factor regardless, but we're paying the price anyway. Currently, what we're paying for delayed diagnoses, for further treatment, for complications, or just for dialysis alone is overwhelming and will really in the future hurt the rest of healthcare. And definitely it is my belief that innovative technologies can make a huge difference. And yes, you know, most of the time when you develop innovative technologies, you do have increased costs, but those costs then drop and shift with improved care to reduce hospitalizations, to reduce secondary complications. And so overall, you get a better balance. But, you know, in some of this discussion that I was listening to, I think there is at least one aspect that everybody seems to be agreeing on. And I think there's one aspect that we're definitely missing. What we're agreeing on, as we've heard and as we've discussed, is the opportunities to bring together different areas of disciplines, different types of expertise, multiple stakeholders together. I hear a lot of public-private partnerships. That's absolutely critical. Governments, stakeholders, academicians, product developers, we all need to work together to share, because no one is going to solve this problem by themselves. But as I'm actually looking at my screen, what we're missing, and I'm surprised that, you know, I only thought about this only now that I look at the screen, is I don't see a patient here. I don't see, you know, the most important person as part of the panelists, you know, because this is what we're working for. This is our primary stakeholder. This is our customer. And without hearing the patient voice and listening to what they want, we all know about things like the Song Initiative, where we looked at what do physicians value in or look at for endpoints, and what do patients value, and they're often completely different. And you know, that's not going to get us where we need to go. But certainly, when you look at the kinds of things that Shuvo presented with regards to miniaturizing and developing at scale, things that could cost $1,000 are now pennies. And I think, you know, in the end, certainly innovation will change and make available to the population the kinds of things that we need. And we need to continue on that path.
Okay. So let's go to some questions from the audience. So Georgie Abraham, who Shubho, you mentioned, makes a really important point and it's a point about the fact that you can't separate medicine for life. And Georgie says that literacy is critically important in kidney disease care. And he gives the example of Kerala that with a relatively small population has a lot of hemodialysis patients and nephrologists. So anyone from the panel, maybe Vivek or Manisha, want to address the issue of overall development and education and how that plays into kidney care?
So, all right. So let me just take that. So I think that goes without saying. if we could improve education, if we could improve economies of countries, we'll solve many, many problems, right? Tom Frieden, the former director of CDC, had a paper in New England Journal of Medicine many, many years ago in which he had created a healthcare pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, the widest near the base is improved socioeconomic situations. So if we improve the socioeconomic circumstances of any population, and literacy goes along with that, so Kerala is the most literate state, but it also probably has one of the highest GDPs in India. It has the best healthcare indices and so on. So they all go hand in hand. And if the overall health improves, the kidney health will also improve. It won't get to the most optimal situation, but it will definitely be better than where it was many, many years ago. But this is not to say that we necessarily need to solve everything with just a lot of money. And this point was made earlier, I forget by who. We can still do a lot within the available resources, because that is not going to happen in a hurry. Certainly not in our lifetimes, that the socioeconomic situation becomes so good in many parts of India or many parts of the world that we don't have to worry about anything else. So we can do a lot more with even the existing resources, which many countries have shown. Bangladesh has shown that you can do actually more with whatever resources you have, compared to countries which have equivalent amount of resources, but they are lagging behind in healthcare indicators. So that brings us to the point of innovation, that we need to continue to think to innovate within the limits of the resources that we might have.
Very quick question to you, Vivek. Is process, in your mind, which is more important, process of care innovation or discovery innovation?
Well, I hate these binaries.
You can only choose one. I'm going to put you on the spot.
I would choose process of care.
All right, good. All right, let's go to some other.
Let me just explain that a bit more, because discovery is going to take long, but I think I can do process of care innovation quicker.
Right, and that's a really good point, because people don't have to die while we're waiting for the wonder drug or the wonder pill or the wonder machine. All right, here's a question from Nathan Letts. He mentions that groups such as the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation and the Gavi Alliance have really vastly accelerated a lot of things. And the question actually for the panel, but particularly Dr. Vivek, is, and it comes back again, financial innovation. What are your thoughts on that, Vivek? And then anyone else on the panel?
So my thoughts there are, financial innovation means how can you do the most good for most people with limited resources that are available, right? I think one of the things that we should think about is not to think of kidney disease, or for that matter, other organ diseases, in siloed terms. They all go hand in hand. So we should think of how we can put in place public health interventions that work in more than just kidney health space. And what we need to do is really to reduce our dependence on the more expensive forms of interventions, which is, for example, physician-based intervention. So Western countries, healthcare delivery is dependent. It's a physician-centric healthcare delivery. And of course, that paradigm is changing, including in US, where you have nurse practitioners and so on. So in countries like India or Bangladesh or many other countries, this was shown by Bangladesh for example, in the prevention of diarrhea-related deaths. So they trained nurses to administer intravenous fluids and then subsequently oral rehydration solutions to children in the communities. And diarrhea deaths have dropped to nearly zero in Bangladesh. So those are the kind of innovations so it is not like you do just something with money, but you need to know how to use the limited amount of money in the best possible way by reducing your dependence on the more expensive alternatives and use it. For example, in India, we have the frontline healthcare workers called ASHA, accredited social health activists, which to non-Hindi speakers also translates into hope. So we now are working with these frontline healthcare workers to innovate healthcare delivery for various chronic diseases in rural communities to people at places where they live. So where they live, where they play, where they work. You need to take healthcare to that spot in order to improve healthcare and reduce the cost of healthcare. Because every time a farmer has to leave his or her work to go and seek medical care into a town 400 miles away from Srikakulam to Visakhapatnam, you can imagine the cost that is involved in all of this. So I think we need to just broaden the way we think of financial innovations as well.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of questions to Shubho. When is your bioimplantable kidney, and when do you think Victor Gura's wearable kidney is actually going to be available? You're muted, Shubho. You're muted.
Sure. It's a question we get quite often. I will provide a timeline by providing some context. And the context is that what Dr. Jha just talked about in a process innovation. So we've got discovery innovations and process innovation. In the middle, I'll say in foster process innovation, you need to be able to use engineering tools. I think that can help us accelerate process innovations. And in some ways, the development of the bioartificial kidney that we are working on, is fundamentally an engineering innovation process. The idea is to think about it as work that was done almost 20 years ago by my colleagues at the University of Michigan, who are able to show the concept of combining cell therapy with filtration provides a clinical benefit. So then the question comes up, how do you take that discovery that was shown years ago and make it available to the larger chronic dialysis population? Well, you do that by sort of meticulously and iteratively building systems that will get us to the end. We're not discovering new science. Yes, we'll have to solve problems, but we're not discovering new science. Very much like we're going to build a rocket that goes to the moon. We just heard about the new rocket that was sent to the ISS by Elon Musk's group. They painstakingly developed it. It took money, and they had to solve engineering challenges, but there's never a question that they would get there. So in many ways, the development of what we are doing in implantable artificial kidney, I like to think, follows that paradigm. If, and there's an if, probably multiple ifs, if there were no unanticipated scientific challenges, and if we're sufficiently funded, again, these are big ifs, the timeline to get through the development and through the first human testing is within 5 years. But again, I have said this for a long time, but I've never been able to necessarily raise the funding at the same time to get it through. So always we've stretched this out, and it's probably not unique to what I do, but that's often how technological breakthroughs are slowed down. So to Dr. Gura's device, I'm very excited to say Dr. Gura has actually shown it in patients. And when I've spoken with Dr. Gura and others in that space, it's not a matter of technology development. They can, but again, they get limited because the incentives, and whether it's financial innovation, the incentives to develop that and make it available to the wider group is not there. So similarly, I would imagine he struggles to get to the goals he wants to achieve because of some of those limitations. But technologically, they're not that far off.
Yeah. Thank you, Shubho. So here's another question, and this would go either to Manisha or to Vivek. The question is, what is the scope of the National Dialysis Program launched in India in 2016? And to that, I am going to add everything that all of you have said speaks to the need of a comprehensive kidney care program in India, is supported by political view, which is supported by political will, and some degree of funding, not necessarily huge, which brings in all of the different stakeholders. Where are we in that regard as well? Either Manisha or Vivek. You're muted, Manisha. You're muted.
So I'll just start, and then Dr. Vivek will take over. So this is because in our state, we have another program, and this National Dialysis Program is not applicable as of now. So Dr. Jha would talk about that. But it's almost similar to that program. So what happens is government funds the dialysis. It's a public-private enterprise, and they give around 14,000 rupees per month for around 10 to 12 sessions of dialysis. Twice a week dialysis is offered, and erythropoietin is also given free to the patients. So the dialysis the program covers a lot of poor patients in Telangana. It has its fallacies, but slowly they are being taken care of. There were lots of questions about water quality. So stepwise, those programs are now being implemented, and I'm happy that before that we never had anything like maintenance dialysis in our government sector. So now all dialysis is funded by this program. So once this program started, the other thing what we realized was that we were just taking care of end-stage kidney disease patients, and we were not doing anything to prevent that end-stage kidney disease, because the numbers became so huge that nephrology took away all the budget of the state, cutting into the other specialities also. So it is the specialty which and nephrology and oncology are the two specialities which consume a lot of money. So now government has included transplant into the program, because transplant is an out from the dialysis. Dialysis, again, you have to provide for life, and transplant, they are providing funding for the transplant as well as immunosuppression, which still works out cheaper than providing for dialysis. And the third aspect, what they are now planning is including the early detection and screening to get out of this circle, because just taking care of end stage doesn't make any sense. What we realize is, though we are talking on one hand about innovations and technologies and all those things, the majority of patients who come to a nephrologist, they come to us in stage 4 or 5. So that should not happen. We have to catch the kidney disease early. I mean, it's not uncommon to see diabetic patients, hypertensive patients who have been seen by multiple physicians or practitioners or nurse practitioners, and they have never been investigated, not even an albumin or creatinine is available, and they come to us in end-stage renal disease. So what's the point of having all the innovations and technologies and newer drugs when by the time we get the patient, they have already, they're already in end stage. So that is the third component of this Telangana dialysis program: transplant dialysis and early detection and screening. So I'll just ask Dr. Vivek to talk to you about the national dialysis program.
And Vivek, can I just add one thing to that? Why does South India do so much better than the North in the care of kidney disease patients? If you could maybe speak to that as well.
So, thank you. So that's just got to do with the general level of development of southern states in India. They are all the social development indicators are better in those states. And so it's not a surprise that kidney care, general health indicators are better as well. But if you look at some of the burden of disease type studies, the disease burden is also higher, because people come to health system, they come to attention, they're picked up, and so they're identified as high burden states too. Now, going back to the specific point, I think the first thing to say, so National Dialysis Program or Telangana State Dialysis Program, what it means is publicly funded dialysis programs, right? So whenever you have public funding available for these kind of treatments, the uptake goes up. There is no doubt about it. So year on year uptake goes up, but the outcomes still leave a lot to be desired. So there is still need for improving the way these programs are delivered. And those lessons are being learned slowly by the public healthcare systems. One of which really highlights the point that that appropriate health technology assessment of the kind that was undertaken in countries like Thailand didn't happen. So just as an example is that if you fund dialysis make dialysis free at the point of care, which means if a patient shows up at dialysis center, they will get free dialysis treatment, really. And we as nephrologists know that care of a patient with end-stage kidney failure is not just the physical dialysis treatment. It involves a lot of medication. It involves the need for the patient to travel to a dialysis center. It involves care, social support for that person when he or she loses that day's wages because they can't get to work. So there's a lot of ancillary expenses. That's all what I meant when I said we need to think in terms of healthcare system overall, and that's slowly being realized, and those reforms are taking place. And then the National Dialysis Program, or even the Telangana Dialysis Program, when it was set up, it was primarily focused around hemodialysis. Hemodialysis is obviously not the most sustainable way to provide dialysis in countries with large rural populations. it's only over the last 1 year or so that the government has included peritoneal dialysis in the scope of the national dialysis program or as part of national health mission. So these reforms are taking place slowly. So it's a process. So it's not like one day you put in a national dialysis program and boom, next day the things get better. This is a process of learning, but it is happening. It's going to take time.
Thank you. Amit, I want to come around to you. So we discussed this a little bit before, but you know, you've been a huge advocate of these newer drugs, and uh, I mean, if we were to get the poly pill, do you see this going into Vivek's poly pill, the SGLT2 inhibitors and the mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist? Is the model that Gilead had with hepatitis C drugs, is that something that you think could also come into the kidney space?
I do, and I think Vivek and I are on the same page. I mean, the work the George Institute has done as an academic research center and organization, you know, I've heard many presentations on, and you know, I can give an example of the credence data, and now we've had 2 or 3 more, you know, groundbreaking papers presented at the ASN, including DAPA-CKD and the empagliflozin piece. Is if you hear the work coming out of the George, and specifically in Australia, you know, for the first time we have value with SGLT2s where $1 spent may create $3 of value for the healthcare system. How we move that into practice is a little bit more challenging because you have to have, you know, potentially a single payer versus what we have in the United States, and a commitment that that investment today will reap those dollars tomorrow. So I would push Vivek on some of these ideas and see if they can grab traction, you know, as he knows the landscape in India much better than I do.
Comment?
So
You've been pushing a lot of questions to you.
Well, I can only agree, and I can tell you that we are in the process of rolling out a couple of polypill trials already in India. We have a grant. We just like Shubha said, we need to raise money for doing all of this. So we have grant applications pending and under consideration. And Amit, you're right that you know, these things, we need to look at these things in long-term perspective. And so question about financial innovation, we can continue to think of how do you convey that information to people who need to understand. How much do you save in the next 10 years for every dollar that you might spend in the next, you know, 1 month or 2 months, etc. So I think that's the kind of, so when we do our studies, we need to build in health economic analysis in those studies, because that is what really captures the minds of policymakers, because they need to, because, you know, you have a new drug today, the moment you go out and say, they tune off and say, oh, it's an expensive agent, so why should we even think about it? But you need to present to them the right kind of data. And similarly, I think the other question about financial innovation. So incentives and disincentives are also important. And that goes to the entire community. For example, what would it take for kidney doctors or nephrologists to change their practice of automatically putting every patient who comes to them on hemodialysis? There is the way the healthcare system is set up, it incentivizes putting patients on hemodialysis to the exclusion of the other types of kidney replacement therapy modalities. If I was a policymaker, I would actually incentivize supportive care to more or less equal, at least you know, in a transparent and in a rigorous way, so that people who are not likely to benefit from dialysis are offered supportive care, because it will be much cheaper to the healthcare system. But the nephrologist should not feel disincentivized by that. Similarly, incentivizing or making reimbursement to nephrologists equal for delivering hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. These are important changes that need to be made to take away the bias that many of us have in favor of one treatment or the other, and thereby offering different treatment alternatives to our patients in an unbiased manner. So I think those are the various kind of things that we need to do. And coming back to the issue of polypills, I think that's really important. We need to do those, but we need to know how to present the information to the people who are going to fund those treatments eventually is also critical.
So there's a comment and about which says that the government-funded dialysis programs are not of good quality. Quality, but again, I think Vivek, you mentioned that you start off and then you move forward. But I want to go to Murray, and I think we've gone a little bit over actually, and but we still have an audience. But I think we probably need to wrap up. So Murray, this is a question to you. So a lot of the questions and comments in the chat have been around the importance of cooperation, collaboration, getting different stakeholders together. You've made a strong plea for that in your initial presentation. After having listened to everything that you've listened about all the complexities of care in India and in emerging economies, what are your thoughts? I mean, has your initial vision changed? Has it been modified? Or is it still the same?
Well, I think it's at a minimum the same, but most likely it continues to increase. In reality, when you even look at what we're facing and how we're some examples of what we've done, look at the Kidney Health Initiative, for example, in the United States that has brought together multiple stakeholders into the same forum where we can work together and listen to each other's issues and come up with better approaches. The Kidney Health Initiative, for example, helps in terms of surveys to get a better understanding of what patients want. And so we need to really bring the different stakeholders together to move forward. Without that, I think we're going to be really struggling. Everybody has their own views of what they think is important and where we need to go. But I think really having a consortium and an international consortium. Kidney Health Initiative, yes, has international members, but it's primarily a U.S. Function. I think, Vivek, with the International Society of Nephrology, could also play a great role. I believe they're also a member of Kidney Health Initiative. Correct me if I'm wrong. And as we think about how do we work together, it really takes a village. It takes all of us working together and to understand. But more importantly, I really think is a lot of what has happened in the past and what we even hear today are outcomes that result in papers, in policy positions, in statements, but nothing that really changes the healthcare of people. And I think that what we really need to keep our eyeball on and focus on are product development, engineering, point of care diagnostics, improved methodologies for screening and education, actual physical devices or drugs or machines that can really influence how patient care is delivered and the outcomes of those patient cares. I mean, can you imagine all of the talk that we have about cell phones without actually having a cell phone in your hand? You need the product and you need to use it, and we need to continue to iterate on it. And that's been my experience in terms of medical device development, that when you first start out with whatever you have, it's at a very rudimentary stage, and it grows. The companies that are working on information technology use various numbering systems, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, goes on. I don't know what the iPhone is now, 12, 14. but it's constant iteration and improvement in actual products that we need to get to patients. And we can only do that if we do this together.
Great, thank you. So I think we should probably bring this discussion to a close. There are some other questions, and I promise you that the panel members will respond to the questions that have not been answered. I want to say that for me personally, this has been quite an amazing discussion. We've spoken about technology, about policy, about funding, about the patient perspective, about coming together, about kidney care programs. Manisha, we didn't discuss very much about the green dialysis concept, but I think it came into this whole issue of new dialysis technologies will presumably consume less water in particular. What I want to do at the end is that I think I want all of you to just in one word or in one phrase, tell me or tell all of us and the audience the single most, in your mind, what is the single most important thing to be able to, again, I'm going to go back to this, cure kidney disease, to have a world without kidney disease, right? I know I'm looking in the future and audacious, but Shubho, let's start with you.
Sure. I'll go back to what you said. You said this is a challenge, and I'll say to the nephrology and the kidney community and to the community I come from, engineers, collaborate. We just don't touch each other. Dialysis came out of a combination of engineering and physicians in the kidney community. Let's do that again and address the unmet needs in kidney disease throughout.
Okay. Amit.
In simple words, I think we're in the age of big data and big ideas, and innovation starts with, as Murray said, the patient. And I think no one cares more about their health than yourself. And I think if we could triangulate those three things, I think we'll get to a place where we can treat all kinds of disease, and especially kidney disease.
Okay. Manisha?
So from my side, I think big ideas will be big only if they are effective for small people at grassroots level. Otherwise, they are not going to benefit if they work only for a handful of people. So the baseline remains collaboration between different stakeholders and between all of us across the globe. And this meeting is an example.
And implementation, right? That's
yes.
Implementation. Murray.
Well, I think Shubho started what I was going to say, of course, is cooperation. And actually, there's a term that I like to use called coopetition, where multiple groups that might seem to be competing with each other find a place where they can actually work together to advance ideas with absolutely the patient at the very center of all of the activities.
And finally, Vivek.
I'm just going to agree to everyone and go back to just make a point that Shubho made at one point earlier, is that we use technology we harness technology to drive process innovation, which allows us to do more with less. Technology is in the center. Even though it seems like we are talking across purposes, but we firmly believe that technology is right in the center of all of this. Process innovation cannot take place without technology. And we didn't talk a lot about all the other kinds of technologies that are available, like sensors and data analytics and so on and so forth. But all of this can really, when they come together and in a gesture of solidarity, is the only way we can solve the problems.
And even though I'm the moderator, I'm going to come in and give you my thoughts. I think at the end of the day, it is about people, but it's also about leadership, right? And my hope definitely from this session is that this group and the linkages really that this group has in the international community in the context of kidney disease and kidney innovation, that we can provide, I guess, both the people and the leadership to make this change happen. And, you know, at a more personal level, I hope that this webinar is going to provide a lot more linkages between some of the, I think, very innovative programs that are currently ongoing in the US, and I think a lot of things that are happening in India. You know, innovation flows both ways. Everybody benefits from it. So with that, I really, truly, as friends, I want to thank all of you for your participation. I do want to thank the participants. Anusha, I'm sure you're listening. This is just a wonderful initiative. I hope that healthcare continues to be an important part of this. So good night to you, Vivek and Manisha. I guess good morning and get back to work to Murray and to Shubho, and for Amit and I guess it's nearing the middle of the day. So again, thank you so much for this, and hopefully we'll do more of these, but we have to implement what we discuss here, not just talk. All right.
Prabir, I'd like to really also take the opportunity to thank you for what you've done putting this together from the very, very beginning. You've done a fantastic job, and please do not stop.
All right, we'll do that together. All right. Thank you all, and thanks to the participants again.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.